I don't know if you've noticed, but gold has been on an absolute tear over the last 18 months. In fact, it's always been on an absolute tear. We can see here the price of gold is always going up. One of the main reasons why people buy gold is because they want certainty during periods of fear, uncertainty, doubt, where maybe they're worried that other assets aren't going to perform as well as they want them to. What they do is they buy gold as a way to store their value rather than holding cash. This is a great scale that shows you what the size of an ounce of gold looks like. So we can see here, this is 100 grams, this is 50 grams, this is an ounce right here. It's about a quarter of the size of an iPhone, maybe a little bit smaller, but it's really thin. It's probably about 2 millimeters thick. And the reason why this really small piece of gold has value is because it gives people certainty in times of uncertainty. Gold has held its value for a very, very long time. So what people do is they hold on to gold during times when they think that the market is about to collapse. They think that things are about to change, where they think that maybe the government is about to default on its loans. This is the same chart that I was showing you before. The price of gold has always just gone up. It went from $20 to $35 to $50 to $100 and so on over time. It kept going up. But one way to interpret this chart is to look at it just as a US dollar price. You can think that gold is getting more valuable. You can think that more people want gold. Maybe you can think that people are using gold in industrial production. The way that I see it, in a way, is flipped around. I see that gold's value is staying the same. 1 ounce of gold has been the same ounce of gold since 5,000 years ago. Why would the value of that go up over time? Of course, people want it, but more and more people are just holding on to gold as a store of value. So the reason why gold's price is going up isn't because its value is going up, it's because the US dollar is decreasing in purchasing power. So what this shows you is that gold has held its purchasing power for a very, very long time. You're able to buy just about the same amount of things with gold today that you could 50 years ago, 60, 70 years ago. I don't know if you've come across this picture before, but it shows you that 10 of these would buy you a house in 1920, 10 of you would buy you a house in 2023. Today, 10 kilos of gold is worth about 1.04 million US dollars. So that's about 1.4 million Canadian dollars. In Canada, you can buy a pretty decent house for $1.4 million. I'm pretty sure in the US, you can get a decent house as well for $1 million US dollars. Of course, it depends on where you are, but in general, you'd be able to get a pretty decent house for a family of four with 10 ounces of gold. When you think that every single lender is about to go bankrupt, when you think that people are defaulting on their mortgages, it doesn't matter. You still have your gold. On the other hand, if you borrow money to buy a house, if the housing market crashes, you could be in the hole for a lot of money. The stock market works the same way. If your custodian goes bankrupt, if your brokerage goes bankrupt, if the US government says that we're going to take your cash and your assets and we're going to bail ourselves out, you don't get access to your stocks because your stocks are being held by a trusted third party. It's exactly the same thing with real estate. I don't know many people who are holding their deed. The bank has the deed, and if you were told to produce it, you probably couldn't within a few hours. It's the exact same thing with US dollars. When you hold US dollars, you trust that the supply won't increase too quickly. And if it does increase quickly, then you lose a significant amount of your purchasing power. So like I said, gold gives you certainty in a time of uncertainty. No matter what happens, you have 1 kilo of gold. If you hold 1 kilo of gold, you have 1 kilo of gold. If you hold 1 ounce of gold, you have 1 ounce of gold. Something that you have to consider, though, is that the supply of gold can always increase. More and more gold can enter the economy if people are willing to put in the time, effort, and energy to go into the earth and take gold out and bring it to the surface. It's been estimated that the supply of gold is increasing by about 2% per year. So if you were to hold your gold for 35 years, the value would have decreased by 50%. I think technical innovation has made it so that goods are more abundant by more than 2% per year. So in a way, if you hold on to gold, your purchasing power is going to increase over time and you're going to be able to buy more and more things with that gold. And because most people see gold as certainty in an uncertain world, we've started using it as a store of value. It's one of the most valuable assets that we have in the entire world. So what we see here is not entire asset classes, but we see assets that are fungible amongst themselves. So all Amazon shares are fungible with all other Amazon shares. Same thing with Nvidia, same thing with Microsoft. The value is exactly the same because all shares are worth the same thing. They give you the same voting rights. They give you the same percentage ownership of profits and losses. So we have companies in the US as 5 of the top 6 assets. We can see here that gold is at the very top because people around the world use gold as a store of value. Right now, the market cap of gold is $21.857 trillion. The market cap of global equities, so all stocks, is about $100 trillion. The market cap of real estate, global real estate, is about $300 trillion. The market cap of global bonds is about $350 trillion. Gold takes up a very, very small chunk of all of the assets around the world because gold isn't the only thing that people use as a store of value. People have started using stocks as a store of value. People have started using real estate as a store of value. Stocks and real estate are supposed to be a risky investment, while gold is supposed to be certainty. There's no risk involved with gold. If you hold an ounce of gold, you know that what you have has the value of 1 ounce of gold. You know that there's probably somebody in the world who's willing to accept gold in exchange for goods and services, for food, for shelter. So if you have gold, you can basically use it to purchase things that you need to survive. Right now, a lot of people use Apple as a store of value. A lot of people use Microsoft as a store of value, Nvidia, Amazon, Alphabet. And keep in mind that a lot of the assets that we see on this list aren't available to everyone. Let's say, for example, if you wanted to buy a very small amount of gold, you probably wouldn't be able to. If you wanted to get a 1 gram bar of gold, the bar is worth about $100. And then the fees to get that bar to you would probably be $50, $60, $70. So the price of gold has to go up by 50 to 70% just for you to break even if you're buying small amounts of gold. Stocks have fixed that with fractional shares, so you can buy any amount of Apple shares if you want to. You can buy $1 worth, $2, $5 worth. But the issue is, again, there's a central authority. So gold has the issue of not being divisible enough, and stocks have the issue of not being decentralized. Because stocks are not decentralized, you can't really use them as a store of value because you don't know what could happen in the background. If your government says that you can't access your stocks are gone. On the other hand, if your government says that you can no longer use gold and you have gold buried in your backyard, they can't take that gold away from you. You'll have that gold no matter what, unless they come to your house and they start digging in your backyard and find your gold. So think about how much more difficult it would be for somebody to confiscate your gold over confiscating your stocks because your stocks are already centralized. If your government goes to your brokerage and they tell them you haven't paid your taxes, they're going to freeze your account and you're never going to be able to access your accounts again unless you pay your taxes. Silver is also a precious metal that people use as a store of value. They expect that the price is going to go up, but the issue with silver is that it hasn't reached a new all-time high in a very long time. We can see here that the price of silver has performed terribly against the price of gold. The price of silver was at about $48 in 1980. In 2011, it hit an all-time high of $49.87, and since then it hasn't gone back up to those prices, even though inflation has completely destroyed your purchasing power. So the reason why people want gold is because it's decentralized. Nobody can stop you from using it. Nobody can stop you from sending it or receiving it from anyone else. You can bury it in your backyard. It's completely disconnected from electricity, from the internet. None of those things can be used to surveil your ownership of gold. And now I think things are about to change because we've introduced digital gold. Gold's entire market cap is $21.8 trillion, and it's about 2.5% of global wealth. On the other hand, Bitcoin's total market cap is about $1.7 trillion, and it's about 0.2% of global wealth. I think that Bitcoin is orders of magnitude better than gold as a store of value because you can actually send Bitcoin over the internet. One of the things that's held gold back is the fact that you have to have centralized authorities that hold onto gold for you in order for you to use it as money. So, for example, you can pay for things with gold peer to peer if you're right next to the other person because gold is physical. But if you wanted to buy something from someone in another continent, you can't really pay them because gold can't be sent over the internet. Bitcoin is at least 10 times better than gold, but it has a much, much smaller group of people who actually understand it. Most people, even if they don't have a finance background, would probably take gold if you were to hand it to them, but they wouldn't take Bitcoin because they don't understand it. They don't trust it. They think that it's worthless. So, what's going to happen when the world finally realizes that Bitcoin is so much better than gold? Bitcoin provides you with certainty in an uncertain world. Bitcoin is completely decentralized. If you have your Bitcoin in a wallet, nobody can take it from you. Nobody can stop it from working. Even if all of these companies go bankrupt, even if your power goes out for a little while, No matter what happens, the wallet that you have will always contain however much Bitcoin you put into it. Bitcoin, just like gold, is a bearer asset where you can take full self custody of it. Gold is physical, so you can give gold to someone peer to peer. You can hand over your gold to them and they can take it in their hand, they can put it in their pocket. You can't do that with Bitcoin because Bitcoin is digital. And how this was solved was with private keys and public keys. So we can see here, this is an address, this is a public key. Anyone can see any address, but only the people who have access to the private keys to that address can actually move the Bitcoin within that address. So let me explain that again. This is an address where anybody can send Bitcoin, but the only people who can move the Bitcoin in this address are the people who have the private key or the password to that address. So we can see here there are 354 Bitcoin worth $30 million. Why is nobody taking them? Because they don't have the private keys to this address. If they had the private keys, they would probably move the Bitcoin immediately, but they don't, clearly, because the Bitcoin is still here. The only person who has the private keys to this address is probably the person who's worked to mine this Bitcoin. And we can see here, this address belongs to F2 Pool. So F2 Pool is a mining pool where they share rewards with people who contribute resources to their mining pool. So in this address, there are $30 million. The only people who can move this $30 million are the people who have the private keys to this address here. And this is a great example of your private key and your address. So your address is your public key. You can share your address with anyone. They can send Bitcoin to your address, but your private key has to remain offline. It has to remain a secret. You can't share it with anyone because if they have your private key, they can take the Bitcoin that's in your address. So back to the rankings, we see here that gold is number 1, Bitcoin is number 8. I think that because Bitcoin gives you a lot of the benefits that gold gives you, but it's also more divisible, it's also more easily transported from location to location. I think that because Bitcoin is so much better than gold, it should be worth significantly more than what gold is worth. Gold has already been widely distributed. Most people who want gold already have it. On the other hand, Bitcoin has not been widely distributed. Most people have no Bitcoin at all. Bitcoin, of course, can also be sent over the internet. So if I wanted to send somebody value in Asia, in Australia, wherever I want to send value, I can easily do that because Bitcoin is digital. It can be sent and received over the internet. Gold has failed as money. And I think the people who are buying gold just don't understand what Bitcoin is. And eventually they're going to figure it out and they're going to want to give away their gold for Bitcoin. I not only think that Bitcoin is going to flip gold, its market cap is going to go higher than whatever gold's market cap is in the future. It's going to 10x gold. Then it's going to 100x gold. Then it's going to 1000 X gold because Bitcoin is just so much better. No matter what happens to the economy, if you have an ounce of gold, that ounce of gold will stay an ounce of gold, even if the economy completely collapses. The same thing applies to Bitcoin. If you have one Bitcoin in cold storage, you're going to have that one Bitcoin no matter what, unless you get it stolen from you, unless you spend it, unless you do something with it to give it away. Another reason why I think that Bitcoin is going to flip gold and it's going to 10x and 100x gold is that anyone in the world can buy Bitcoin. The price of Bitcoin is going to go up faster than gold because you can buy smaller and smaller denominations of Bitcoin. The fact that 1 ounce of gold costs you $3,200 limits a lot of people from being able to buy gold. Like I said before, if you wanted to buy smaller quantities of gold, you'd have to pay higher fees to make the transaction happen. One Bitcoin, of course, costs $85,000, while the price of an ounce of gold is $3,200, but you can divide Bitcoin infinitely. One Bitcoin can be split into 100 million units, so you can buy any fraction that you want to. You don't have to buy one whole Bitcoin, you don't have to buy zero point 0.1 Bitcoin, you can buy any amount of Bitcoin that you want to. The smaller units of Bitcoin are called Satoshis. One Bitcoin is 100 million Satoshis. Today, $5 will give you about 6,000 Satoshis. So what this is going to do is that over time, no matter what happens, people will be able to buy Bitcoin. If at some point people can't afford an ounce of gold, then they're not going to be able to buy it anymore and the bubble is going to pop and it's going to collapse. With Bitcoin, people can buy smaller and smaller amounts. And eventually, when a Satoshi is worth way too much, we're going to be able to divide Bitcoin even further. I don't know if I mentioned this before, but Bitcoin also has a finite quantity. It's the only asset in the world that does have a finite quantity. You can produce more silver, you can produce more Alphabet shares, more Amazon shares, Nvidia, Microsoft, Apple. You can mine more gold. But once all 21 million Bitcoin are created and added to the economy, nobody will be able to create more. The only way for you to get Bitcoin will be to exchange your time, your energy, your resources for Bitcoin. since nobody will be able to create more Bitcoin, the price of Bitcoin is going to rise forever. More of everything else can be produced, but more Bitcoin can't be produced. And of course, this applies to gold as well. The price of gold is going to go to zero in terms of Bitcoin because more and more gold can be discovered. More and more people are going to be willing to give away their gold to buy Bitcoin. You have to remember that most of the gold supply isn't actually being used for its industrial purposes. People are just holding on to gold in their vaults and their safes at home. They have it stored at a bank in a security deposit box. So once those people figure out that Bitcoin is so much better as a store of value than the gold that they have, they're going to get rid of that gold to buy Bitcoin. I've really been liking this website because it shows you these zoomed in values of all assets. So we can see here the price of gold has gone up over time. The price of Bitcoin has gone up much, much faster. If we price an ounce of gold in terms of Bitcoin, we can see that the price comes down and it comes down exponentially. This chart doesn't seem too volatile, but this is in logarithmic. If we look at it in linear terms, we can see that the price has fallen extremely quickly. At one point, 1 ounce of gold cost 12,500 Bitcoin, while today it costs about 0.03 Bitcoin to buy 1 ounce of gold. So today it costs about 3 million Satoshis to buy an ounce of gold. Eventually, this number will go lower and lower. At some point, it'll cost you 100,000 Satoshis to buy an ounce of gold. Then it'll cost you 10,000. Then it'll cost you 5,000. That number is going to keep decreasing because the people who want gold already have it, but almost nobody has Bitcoin. So as the supply of gold keeps increasing, more and more people keep bringing their supply to the market, we're going to see that the price of gold in terms of Bitcoin is going to continue to fall forever. We might see the value of gold temporarily increase in terms of Bitcoin, but over the long term, the trend is going to be down. So the moral of the story here is don't buy gold, don't get distracted by gold. Gold seems like it's great, it's doing very well, but over the long term, I think Bitcoin is going to massively outperform gold because Bitcoin is a much better asset. It has all of the characteristics that we need money to have, while gold doesn't. I personally think that gold's price in terms of US dollars will go up forever, but in terms of Bitcoin, it's going to drop forever. Because Bitcoin is finite and there's essentially an unlimited number of ounces of gold available, we're going to see that the price of gold is going to decrease forever in terms of Bitcoin.